So my name's Mandidextrous and I am a music producer on Ram's sister label called Program and a few other different labels, and I'm going to show you guys what I do in regards to making my kick bass sections for my big drum and bass tracks. So a big thing about my tracks is I tend to have the switches in my tracks between the drum and bass sections and my techno sections, and what I thought I'd show you on here is just how I quite simply create a kick bass thing and then also a drum and bass thing, and how the D&B thing often influences my drum and bass section, my techno sections as well. So from years and years and years of writing hard tech sounds, I've been kind of experimenting with different ways of creating kick basses. It can be really complicated and it can be really quite simple at times. As most things with music production, I think simplicity is often the way. And you can get caught up with, things like phase and everything like that with writing kick bass. So this one particular, I actually, on this track, I started as a drum and bass section, and I used the kick drum from my drum and bass drums as the kick drum to lead the techno section as well, which could be seen as quite controversial, because in writing techno, you kind of want to develop the kick so it has enough like kind of low end to let the track have that energy and to create good phase between your kick and your bass. But for this, I've just used a D&B kick, which are often quite a lot higher cut, and in fact I've done quite a lot of EQing and effects to kind of make this kick kind of pop a bit, but it's also quite short, which kind of helps with connecting the phase between the kick and the bass for the techno section. So instead of creating a big fat techno kick that's all the way down at 40 hertz, 50 hertz, I kind of used a D&B kick, which is a lot higher in frequency and a lot punchier, really, less sub. So I could put more sub into the bass. And the bass on this one is predominantly just made really simply in Serum, which is my kind of go-to synth. For the last kind of like 5-6 years or so, I've been really getting into my synthesis and learning synthesis. I'm not great at it, but I can certainly make a lot of my own sounds now, which is great. And this is kind of one of those signature sounds. It's kind of taken on a kind of side bass kind of thing, so I just play it on its own. And it's essentially just a pluck bass, just a really simple pluck bass. And I can say it's quite simple to make. I mean, I've just basically shortened the decay on the envelope 1, and I brought the sustain all the way, like nearly all the way to the top. I just felt that was what the sound needed. It needed to be quite short and staccato. And then I've just used this LFO 1 to do pretty much all of the work. So on here, if I just make it bigger, actually, see a bit better. I've just literally got LFO 1 with like a really simple curve on quarter notes there, and I've just assigned that mainly to a basic shape over here on a saw. I think that's a saw or a square. Like I said, I'm not that great at synthesis. Well, I don't know everything, but I'm learning. But yeah, I found this shape worked the best for what I was wanting to do. So if I just bypass these few things, we can kind of see what's going on. So originally it was just kind of just that, which is kind of like, if I take the sub away as well, it's like kind of not really anything. But then what I did from there is just LFO over to take the LFO over to the filter, and created some movement just to give it like kind of like the high end kind of click. I gave it some resonance, some drive, some fatness, and then I just added in an FM from the B oscillator, which is actually on its kind of preset sound over here. So that's the standard wave that is there when you open it. And I just FM'd off of that. I just thought that that was kind of like the sound that I'm going for. I also LFO'd the detune on there as well, because that sound is now affecting my main oscillator. So I kind of just wanted a bit of width coming through that FM as well, and then just added a sub behind it on direct out. And that kind of gives me the kind of basics of it. I also added some drive and distortion on the back end using this LFO yet again. And I also used this EQ here. If I take the EQ off, it kind of like clashes a bit with this direct sub out. So I use this EQ here just to kind of like pull this sound away from the sub. So the sub's just kind of doing its own thing, and you've got this clicky plucky sound over the top. And that's the essential basics of the kind of kick bass that I've been going for with my crossover D&B techno tunes. But from there, I kind of wanted to process it a little bit. I never do much processing, but I felt like I needed to add some EQ curve onto here as well. Just really quite simple. I just boosted around 40 a little bit and pushed it up around 400 hertz, and then gave it a bit of a high shelf as well. And then from there, I needed to tighten up the kick to bass thing. So if I solo in the kick as well at this point, and this is a kind of process that I usually do when creating my kick bass, is I start with like a kind of, a kick or a fundamental bass sound, and then I, like have them both soloed together, so I get a feel on how they're sounding together. And from there, I use this tool quite a lot. This is one of my go-tos. In fact, I've just upgraded to Nicky Romero's Kickstart 2 because it's got the ability to sidechain on it as well, which is really, really great. But for this one, I've just used it just to shape that kind of sidechain element at the kick to the bass. Just taking away this like kind of start of the bass hit there to give the kick a bit more room to come through. Which is like kind of automatically tidied it up quite a lot. I also use scope as well, just to check phase on things as well and stuff like that. So in fact, I should probably have put that on the group. I probably do have one on the group somewhere. I don't, but yeah, it's a great tool to kind of check your phase between your kick and your bass, because I mean it is kind of important to make sure that you are getting a good phase between your kick and your bass. So you can actually on this this tool scope, you can like kind of freeze on like kind of a kick, and you can kind of zoom in on it, so you can see if there's good phase there. If you got bad phase, there'll be like a real broken bit here, which kind of, that's the distortion peak, and it's not looking too bad. I think the phase is pretty good there. So that would kind of tell me that I'm kind of in the right ballpark, and also just using my ears as well is really important. But then for the rest of the bass processing, it was really quite simple, and this is a trick that I used to do quite a lot in my old tracks, in my techno stuff, but I kind of like, you learn these kind of techniques that kind of help, like, mold a sound or create a sound, and then you go off on tangents and find other different ways of doing it, and sometimes that can be a bit detrimental, and you end up kind of like just making it harder for yourself. And I was sat in the studio with Akov, brilliant neurofunk producer, big up Akov, and Alex, kind of on a different tune we were doing, I wrote a very similar bass, and he was like, why don't you just chuck some distortion over it? And it didn't really occur to me, but it makes such a difference. So I kind of like made this original bass patch here, but then I chucked amp over it, and it just brings the whole thing to life. It goes from being quite a thin kind of alright kick bass to a really powerful kick bass, and that's the kind of energy that I kind of want to have in my tracks. So that's why I wanted to show my kick bass thing. I tend to try and keep kick bass as simple as I can. I actually spent years and years and years in the hard tech scene trying to write these mad kick basses that they get in like Frenchcore and hardcore, hard tech. It's so technical, actually, really. Can be quite technical if you're trying to create a massive big room kick and keep a huge bit of bass in there at high BPMs. It can be really hard to keep the phase, and it got to a point where I was overthinking it, and I was actually ruining my tracks because I was overthinking it. So when I came back to things, trying to look at it as a more drum and bass like bass track, I decided to take the pressure off myself when it comes to the kick bass sections and just do something really simple that's really effective, that works on a dance floor and has good energy. And I feel like making these pluck basses and using this kind of processing, keeping it quite simple, really helps, and just finding good sounds for the kick drums or creating kick drums that are going to work with the track has been a real benefit to my new sound.